You can introduce yourself if you like to, and start at the beginning, what year it was when you got into veganism, and then what happened, what health consequences you had, and everything.
All right. Well, my name is Guy. I'm from here in Northern California, around the Sacramento area. And this whole story started out somewhere around late 2011. I was living out in a more rural area at the time. I had been in a home business with my father and myself out in the countryside, so it was kind of an opportunity to be away from all the noise and chaos of the city environment, which was a really nice experience. And I guess ever since my high school years, I had, I guess you could say, fundamentally felt there was something inherently wrong with the system that we live in this world. So it kind of started me on this what I felt to be the search for truth early on. And I'm sure when you're kind of wading through the murky waters of all the conspiracies out there and the different theories that are out there regarding certain things, you can come across a lot out there. Sometimes it can be kind of a misturn down the rabbit hole, so to speak. And during the course of my research into some of the powers at work within this world today and for the past couple hundred years, as a matter of fact, I came to see how they view us, those who are not part of their exclusive club, often of ethnic, religious cohesion, but many other factors. But as I was seeing how they view us, around the same time I started to see some of your kind of classic vegan propaganda videos where you see the insides of these modern industrial factories, just the assembly line manner of slaughter and treatment of the animals being injected with all kinds of chemicals and hormones and all the the horror that is inside of those buildings. So seeing that roughly around the same time, I, due to what I had seen and maybe some other factors I had been researching at the time, said, well, if the so-called elite view we the goyim as these cattle and want to treat us like this, kill us off, I don't want to treat anything else like that. That was the rationale at the time.
Right.
Aside from the fact that I think most people who would see the way not just the industrial farming with the animals, but modern agriculture as a whole pretty much rapes the earth and as an affront to nature. That's how I saw it at the time, as kind of a reaction counter to what I felt was the mode that society was being pushed in. And it's interesting as we now see with the push for veganism now, that whereas many people went into it maybe viewing it from a countercultural angle, so to speak, it is now becoming pushed into the mainstream and being able to reclaim the traditional ways of living and eating is the taboo now. But that'll be full circle when I go on with this. But I dove right in. I read up on websites, what kind of recipes you can do. So I just dove right in, no transition of doing just cheese or milk. I had my last meals of meat and cheese, whatever it may be, and then from there I just went all in. I was getting lots of lentils and rice and various vegetables, doing scrambles, etc. And I did pretty well on that for about 5 years, to be honest. I stayed pretty active. I would ride my bike a lot, go for hikes, go out into the mountains and do more strenuous hikes. And for the most part, I felt pretty well. My endurance was great. Never really came down with any colds or illnesses or anything like that for the first several years. I don't know if this is a factor that maybe contributed to some of the longevity during that period, but I also had and still have an interest in the benefits of certain medicinal herbs And perhaps some of those herbal supplements I was taking at the time may have helped with some of my energy, aside from the fact that my bones, my organs, my body as a whole had been absorbing nutrients from animal foods my whole life before becoming vegan. That could have a factor as well. But I did supplement with B12 here and there. At first I believed a lot of the propaganda out there, like, oh, you don't need to supplement, it's available in the soil and certain things, or you can get it from kelp or chlorella or spirulina, things like that. But I never really got into getting powdered spirulina or chlorella, things like that. I would occasionally take a capsule and think I was fine. And mostly I just did it to shut everyone else up at first, because that's the first thing when you go vegan. Where are you going to get your B12? Aside from where do you get your protein? Just as when you go back to eating meat, especially raw meat, people always say, oh, well, what about parasites? What about bacteria? It's always one of the first questions you hear. So, I got those little tablets just to shut everyone up and get my B12, or so I thought. But, later come to find out it's not bioavailable B12, or not as much.
This was 2011 to 2016?
Yeah, let's say 2011, 2012, 13, 14, and into 15. I was feeling all right. I was feeling pretty good as far as my energy levels and mental focus, ability to have quick memory recall. All the reflexes and functions were seemingly fine. But during the course of, say, late 2012, the business that I had been operating with my father at the time had kind of tanked, and we had to close up shop, and I was in a situation where I was really open for anything. It was either find another means to work, or go back into the same old town, the same old thing that I'd seen for 20 years, and I didn't want to do that. Most of my old friends had either, moved away or settled down, or there was just kind of a natural, moving on in life, as happens, in many cases with people, when you grow and learn and do your own thing. So I chose to go out on the road for a while. I had a friend who worked as a trucker, independent contractor, and was doing over-the-road driving all over the country. And he needed a trip planner and a dispatcher, since he was an independent contractor. So I agreed to be his onboard trip planner and dispatcher for a period of about 6 months while we were on the road, while we were also trying to write a book and start a small publishing company. So, that's a lot of work going on while you're on the road, traveling all over the country. But it was an interesting journey nonetheless, and I even remained vegan on the road, even with a little camp cooker. This guy was vegan too, believe it or not, vegan trucker, kind of, rare occurrence, but it does happen. And we have a little cooker in the back and do all, beans and rice, and, go to the diners and get all the, improvised, vegan or vegetarian options. And I was even pretty strict, say there was capsules or something that had gelatin on the outside. It was so, wanted to stick to my principles that I would open the capsules and dump it in a smoothie or something, because I didn't want to have the gelatin.
Right.
I was that strict for a while. But after settling down in Nashville for a while, after all that time on the road, I think I started to really notice the effects of nutrient depletion, though I certainly didn't view it as that at the time. I just thought I was tired and overworked, and that may have been the truth. When you're really overworking, experience higher stress levels and anxiety, it can start to leach nutrients from your body.
Right.
And looking back now, I realized that was what was starting to happen, where I was starting to experience probably some of the highest levels of stress in my life thus far, due to the certain work and living situations that just weren't working out at the time. It turned out to be an incompatible situation. Due to these factors, I started to feel physically weaker, because at this time I was without a vehicle. I'd be riding my bike to and from work. I noticed my endurance started to go down a bit. My muscles behind the knees would have periodic twitching, like a tensing that would happen for, sometimes 5, sometimes upwards to 20, 30 seconds, and it would cease. But I didn't tell anyone about that at the time. I figured, oh, I'm just tired. I didn't, stretch properly. I've been, riding for a long time. I'm just tired, and it would tense up and it would go away. As the years went on, leading up until this past year here, when I switched to ovo-lacto vegetarian, starting around late December, I had already been having full-blown brain fog where I would, say, go into a room to get something in the kitchen, and then I would, hesitate for a minute and forget what I had been going to get, and my memory was slower, and I was just feeling tired all the time.
Yeah.
And I had started to look into keto as well. In fact, it was the first time in my life that I'd ever heard of phytic acid. And if I hadn't heard from my girlfriend sometime last year about phytic acid, I probably wouldn't have heard of it until maybe a month or 2 ago after recently. I certainly didn't know anything about oxalates or lectins. I've never even heard of that stuff until very recently. And now I know why I was feeling so much weaker after I learned about those. But I, at the time, had heard about the phytic acids that are present in a lot of grains and legumes and many other plant-based foods that inhibit the ability to absorb certain nutrients, including protein. Now, at that time, my diet was very carb heavy. It was almost the staple of my diet was heavy carbs, low fats, and practically no cholesterol. Because for the most part, a vegan diet is not just a low cholesterol diet, it's pretty much a no cholesterol diet.
Did you try to do low fat on purpose?
Well, I had, been seeing how, the phytic acids being you say low fat. I hadn't really had that much of a concern at first. I was eating, like I said, mostly grain-based. I always enjoyed doing things in the kitchen, and cooking my own meals, and of course everything is cooked. But I really got into kind of like Indian style cuisine with heavily rice and lentil based, with lots of vegetables fried in a pan in hydrogenated vegetable oils and all kinds of spices on top. Sometimes 7 different spices, and everything fried in oil, or having some very heavy carb-based staple of the meal. And I've always had a rather slim build, so fat was never really a big concern for me. I would pretty much eat whatever, but I tried to stay away from junk foods. I did have a weakness for like chips and salsa and things like that here and there, but for the most part I tried to avoid being a so-called junk food vegan at the time. I didn't drink sodas. I haven't drank sodas for years.
My question is if you did something like 80-10-10 on purpose.
Oh no, I was never specific with my macros.
Okay.
Until I heard about ketogenic diet, which was about a year ago. And of course, it's very difficult to try to do a ketogenic diet if you're still trying to be vegan.
The food you ate was quite oily, you said.
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay.
For instance,
this is what vegans would call not really low fat then.
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily striving to be low fat. It wasn't necessarily very oily, just to give you an instance.
It was just very carb based.
Yeah, very carb based. For instance, I would boil rice and lentils separately, add spices to those, and then be stir frying essentially onions, garlic, ginger, bell peppers, sometimes tomato, and other vegetables, potatoes. Sometimes I loved potatoes, and those would feature heavily sometimes. All of those vegetables fried in a pan, and then rice and lentils mixed in with that to create one dish.
Right.
And at the time, it felt satisfying. I felt, very full, but just so full. And of course, you go to the bathroom a lot, and there's the gas issue. And at the time I thought, oh, it's just natural when you're eating these things. And at the time that I was, originally going into it, I viewed this, I guess mistakenly, as a embracing of nature, a return to nature. That's how I thought at the time, especially since I had been living in a more directly rural area where the backyard pretty much opens up into oak woodlands, and it was nice to be able to reconnect in that way. So maybe I got the signals mixed a little bit, but I realized that was incorrect. I had seen the images of the industrialized slaughterhouses and seeing how that is out of tune with nature, but then there came to be a disconnect in my own mind, which I think happens with many vegans and vegetarians when they first see the realities of industrial farming. It's such a shock. It's like a scene out of a horror film or something like this, when you're seeing all these dangling bodies being slit open in succession, and necks slit, and blood running all over the place, and sometimes entrails spilling out onto the floor. It's like the lyrics is like a death metal song or something. When you walk in there, it's quite shocking and I guess appalling if you've never really seen that. And of course that's another disconnect. When people go to the grocery store, they will see the prepackaged meats, all nice, clean looking. Sometimes they even have dyes in them, and there's a big disconnect from having that nice cut on your plate to where it actually came from, what went into it, and what the connection to the natural cycles of life, death, and all that's in between, and possibly as part of a great cycle. It's just a commercial commodity that is bought and sold and consumed and then repeated. So I think there's a disconnect on both sides there. But when one comes to break that automatic association of all animal foods being linked with industrial slaughter and massive capitalistic endeavors that are raping the planet in so many other ways, then I think it's possible to really reconnect to the natural cycles of life without, not being, against it, not running against that current of nature. There's this connection that people make in their minds that all animal food comes from those, massive industrial slaughterhouses. They get removed from the idea of the animals that actually get to live their lives on farms and just the natural process of life and death and nature. And it becomes so politicized and extreme that people's minds get blinded to reality.
What other symptoms did you get 2015, 16?
Other symptoms, yeah, and even up until this past year, because I really only changed my diet about a month and a half ago, so this is all pretty new to me.
You were vegan up until then?
I switched to lacto-ovo, well actually not ovo, just lacto-vegetarian in December or sometime in winter of last year, because I had been trying to go more keto even while remaining
vegan.
In this case vegetarian, because I said, okay, if I'm going to try to do low carbs, all of my beloved lentils and rice and grains are going to have to go, and I'm going to have to find other means. So I started implementing a little bit of cheese and milk and cream, but I was still eating soy, because I was like, oh, I got to get my protein. And I had seen some recent research that had suggested that the effects upon hormone receptors weren't as big of a scare as had originally been seen, because some of the results had been on rats, whereas previously I never wanted to touch soy because of worried about the phytoestrogens and things like this. But I started to eat more of it just to get the daily protein, because I wasn't doing any legumes, or well, technically soy is from a bean, so it comes from a legume. And doing like tempeh, still doing the stir fries though, everything like hydrogenated vegetable oils, and always with highly kind of spicy, pungent root vegetable like onion and garlic and ginger. But I slowly started to cut that out, and I had been doing the cheese and milk, but that was all pasteurized, so I still wasn't really getting the true benefits of it until I started to do a little more research. But between that point of when I moved from Nashville and I was living in South Carolina for a while, about 20-25 miles inland of the coast, and then I finally moved back here, and just to cover that period of the years leading up to now, I had, again, just experienced chronic fatigue. It felt like my adrenal glands were just burnt out. I was drinking a lot more caffeine. Again, my caffeine intake increased to around sometimes 3 cups of coffee per day for a certain period. I just felt so tired and exhausted and fatigued. And that went on for about 3 years.
Any teeth problems?
Actually, yes. Yeah, thanks for reminding me. I started to notice, even just a few years into veganism, a lot of plaque buildup behind my front lower teeth. And I hadn't visited a dentist in a while anyway. I didn't have dental insurance at the time, so I just thought, I'll just on top of brushing my teeth, everything will be fine. But over the years, it really just started to have this massive plaque, kind of unsightly plaque buildup on the back there. I think just from so many carbs and sugars that would be in my diet consistently. I mean, it's pretty much high carb, no cholesterol, low fat diet where I'm constantly intaking some kind of sugar in one form or the other, and it did start to have its effect there. Though very surprisingly to me, when I started eating raw primal diet within the past month and a half, about a month and a half or so, I've started to already notice a serious decrease in the plaque buildup. It's actually been going down. It still has a little bit of a ways to go, but even just in a short period of time, I've noticed a very noticeable difference in that area. But yeah, there was that issue, sometimes muscle spasms, chronic fatigue, adrenal exhaustion.
Because of the coffee also?
Well, yeah, that became a self-perpetuating cycle too. I had been, feeling tired before that, so I started having more caffeine to try to get, the next, little boost of energy throughout the day, but it's just like, it's not real energy, it's just kind of stretching you further. But once I really started doing my research and I had watched some of your videos, to be honest, I forget how I first came across your videos. I think it was someone in the comment sections of Thulian Perspectives channel. It may have actually been Unlock the Power, gave a link to some of your stuff, and I checked out his page or saw a link to the video of you eating high liver for the first time, and like one of those like 100-year egg type of thing. And I'd never heard of such a thing in my life. I think I may have heard of the egg thing when I was a kid, and something they do in China, but I had never heard of such a thing. And I've always considered myself a pretty open-minded person. Even when I was in the midst of my vegan diet, I was never preachy about it to people. It was a decision I made for my own reasons, and in this case, I kind of came in from kind of a philosophical, ethical point of view, I guess you could say. In that regard, I was not thinking about nutrition. I thought if a well-balanced vegan diet can be healthy for everyone, type of thought that they put out there. So it wasn't a concern at the time. Obviously, it came to be one, but even then, I was pretty open-minded. So by the time I saw your high meat videos some months back, I was just intrigued. It seemed kind of strange, but a lot of things are strange in this world that are quite interesting. So I checked it out. I didn't really feel grossed out or anything. It just seemed certainly out of the ordinary, and I never heard of this. So I watched a few more of your videos, and I came across the name Agenus Wunderplanets coming up quite frequently. So that's when I said to myself, okay, there's this Agenus character, and I looked him up. Of course, some of your videos have featured him speaking and have excerpts from his lectures and speeches. So I got a good start there, especially learning about the whole bacteria and parasite issue, which is such a prime concern for many people. And I think I could be confident in saying probably the key factor that kind of scares a lot of people away from trying this is that bacteria and parasite factor that we've all been taught. And of course we can get into that later as far as the reality about it. And of course you have a very good video out on it, I think, and Agenus speaks more at length in this as well.
Yeah.
But back to him, I started to look into his lectures and articles, and I had also, thanks to Milk Jar as well, the work that you and he have done, seeing some of his videos, he also references Agenus quite a bit and credits him with his journey back to health as well. So I tracked down this book, We Want to Live, by him, and just absolutely amazing story. I've come across people on the internet who seem to think that Agenus is crazy or he's exaggerating his tales, but stranger things have happened in the world, and I think it's a matter of the observer who is so disconnected from nature, seeing someone who has reconnected to nature in such a powerful way. It seems like an alien thing. It almost seems unnatural to be more natural in this day and age, and I guess that is the kind of frequency of the modern society we live in, that unnatural is natural and natural is unnatural. Everything's black, white, vice versa. So I started looking at that. I read his book all the way through, and I highly recommend anyone who is interested in this to look into Agenus Wunderplanet's book, We Want to Live. It is available online, and of course you can order the physical book. Reading through the treatments of various diseases and what actually causes diseases and the misconceptions about illness and health and nutrition that are so prevalent. It really was very eye-opening looking through this, and I'm never one to just dive into something without doing my due diligence or research first. And after looking into the realities that there's so many people have healed from diseases, have recovered their health, their energy, I was convinced after realizing that there's really nothing to fear when it comes to parasites, bacteria, and the prevalency thereof on meat is just not there when it comes to the raw foods. Most of these outbreaks have been due to cooked foods or some other factor that's going on with industrial chemicals or the things that are being shot into animals and the industrial fertilizers, etc. The pollution and the chemicals.
Back to the veganism, I want to ask how you see the future of veganism.
When it comes to the future of veganism, that's an interesting...
Where is it heading, what is this, a movement? Is it a trend? What is it?
I think there are certain people who really want it to be a movement. That's certainly a case out there. But at the same time, even just observing what has been going on and is continuing to occur, even just very visible on YouTube, so many people are reverting. There are so many ex-vegans now. There's so many ex-vegan testimonies and interviews, and even some formerly vegan YouTubers have realized that their health was being sacrificed as well when it came to their well-being and their nutrition. Really, when it comes to the nutrition factor, that's the key one that is going to be the nail in the coffin for veganism, as I see it. Though when it comes to the factor of it being a movement or something that is being pushed, I can definitely see that. I do believe, from the trend I can see, as long as this civilization is standing, they are going to continue to push the more kind of soylent green, so to speak, future, where the thralls, the peons, the slaves, the commoners will eat their grains and their plant-based foods, their fake meats, their Beyond Burgers if they want to have some, luxury. And those behind the scenes will know that it's something that they have pushed upon them that is contrary to nature. I think this will continue as long as the civilization continues to go, but as the bottom is falling out of society, the civilization more and more as we go on, I think it's only inevitable that there will be those who can wake up. They're using their intellect and their intuition to reject the programming and embrace nature once again.
Do you regret veganism now that you did it?
I do feel that I was misinformed in a way. Let's put it that way. There's so many thoughts that come up when I've learned about, the push for it, the agenda, and things like oxalates, lectins, phytic acids, which I had never heard of until the past month and a half, maybe 2 months, but really started to look into such things very recently. And when one realizes that you just cannot absorb the vital nutrients and vitamins and minerals and all the aspects that are needed for optimum human health from these plants due to these essentially self-defense mechanisms that these plants have to try to prevent themselves from being eaten in a way, it kind of clicks the light bulb that that's not the way to go. We can have all kinds of talks all day about ethics or philosophical viewpoints or personal decisions, or if there's a spiritual angle to it, etc. And certainly it is possible, if one is concerned about reducing the amount of harm they do to the earth and to plant and animal life, you can live in a balanced way. The animals do so too. The animals aren't destroying forests and tearing up whole fields and sending all kinds of pollution into the atmosphere that they breathe. That's something humans do, and it is not contrary to be able to eat an animal-based diet and also be striving to have a balance in the amount of harm you do to the earth and to animals, so to speak. But that can get a lot of people in the type of mindset that any harm, any death is bad, and I think that's another disconnect from nature. Again, either from the vegan side of things or the common shopper who just gets their meat from the grocery store and only sees the prepackaged thing, or people, all foods really, get it out of a can or get it out of a package and just add water and now it's somehow food. It's a disconnect from what food really is, right, on all sides.
Do you have any contact with the trucker who was vegan? Is he still vegan, or anybody else you contact with?
No more. That was some years ago, where I'd been in contact with that individual.
I was just wondering if there's people who you know who are being also.
Yeah, there's still some people I know out there, though I don't have extensive contact with them because I started to see some of their symptoms that were popping up in, shall we say, the mental sphere, and I had already kind of made my distance. Some of them I know, if I were to still be in contact with them and to be communicating with them, they would probably be very judgmental, very angry with this almost cult-like fanatical response the fact that I had changed my diet.
Right.
But I'm speaking from a position of having gone through the symptoms that I see other people suffering, and I know the process that goes into it when people try to rationalize it away. It's like, oh, I'm just tired, oh, I just had a long day at work, or oh, I just need to get some more B12, or a little more of this. That's when people get into the supplements too. They start rationalizing, and the next thing you know, you have a whole cabinet full of all kinds of different supplements. And I certainly wish them good health in their journey back to it, but some people, the fanatical brainwashing is so strong that they will have a hostile response to anything that goes contrary to their worldview, and that goes beyond just diet, of course.
Mm-hmm. Would you say that some people last longer because they don't have so much stress in their life, whereas you had this moment? I interviewed a vegan runner, and he was running a lot, and it's obviously also a lot of stress.
Yeah,
that's why he only lasted a few years and was super thin.
Yeah, I think that could be a definite factor depending on what one is doing in their life, how active they are, what types of activities are, what their daily environment is like, etc. And of course, if a person was relatively healthy before going in, when they had been eating even just the standard diet, which isn't healthy in itself in many ways, that's a whole nother issue, they're still going to have more nutrients saved up from what they had been eating. And some people, maybe their energy stores can last longer, but if one experiences some kind of trigger event, I guess you could say, in life, such as high stress or anxiety, or some people may have like a death in the family or something like this that kind of changes the daily reality for a while, that stress is going to have an effect on your body and be leaching your nutrients. And if you're already nutrient deficient to begin with, you're really going to feel it fast. And there are going to be all those rationalizations of what it might actually be. But the very last thing that someone who's been so ingrained with doing something for years on end, or even if they've been doing it for a short time but have been very thoroughly and convincingly programmed, they will find any excuse but nutrition to account for what's going on.
Mm. Anything else you would like to add? Any experience, something you learned, or something special you would like to say to any vegans or watch?
Well, I would certainly encourage those who are coming out of veganism or vegetarianism to look into the videos on this channel, especially regarding cholesterol, parasites, bacteria, all of those aforementioned toxins that are in many plants, such as oxalates, lectins, phytic acids, and many things of this nature, because we've been lied to about so much when it comes to health and nutrition. And for me, this all started out as part of an overreaching search for truth, so to speak. And I encountered many red pills, so to speak, over the past years, learning about what's going on in this world and some of the facts of history, and certain realities that go in countercurrent to what the official story of many things are, whether it's historical, political, economical, biological, or nutritional. And really the dietary and nutritional red pill was a huge one for me, and that's the most recent thing I've come across, is how much we've really been lied to. I would encourage looking into it, about some the recent studies about cholesterol, but it is really how it doesn't have a connection to heart disease, how you're not going to die from having high animal fats and saturated fats, how you're not going to have clogged arteries or get cancer or heart disease, how a raw egg or raw milk, how the raw meat is not going to kill you and make you sick, and it's not going to give you diarrhea. Of course, if you have toxins built up in your body, a more raw and natural diet will cause some detoxifying effects in certain cases if you're filled with all kinds of toxins. But that's a natural effect, and I would just encourage people to look into it with an open mind and continue to do their research and not be closed off to new possibilities, especially if one is already acknowledging that we've been lied to about so much in this world. Why not look into this?
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm.